Well, it's another Tuesday, so we're going to get rolling here. And the one thing we're often asked about is what do we look at for the weather side of it? Okay, we are going to move into the heart of a weather market here in the U.S. And I think what happens with weather is sometimes we just take too narrow of a focus and look at what is the weather map changing here over the noon hour overnight instead of taking a step back and looking at the big picture. And I guess that's what we really try to do is let's just take a step back and see what's going on in the big picture. And right now, the focus is going to be on U.S. weather. I mean, yes, global production matters. Okay, we need to focus on where world weather is at as well. But so much attention, especially for the corn and soybean market, is put on the U.S. So here are a few things that we take a look at in here. The one thing we always try to step back and take a look at is the past 7-day precip maps. Okay, this is the past 7-day precip map from today. Showing the Midwest, and throughout a lot of the Midwest, a ½ inch to 2 inches of rain were noted over the last 7 days. Okay, this map is updated by NOAA every single day. We admit, though, what we tend to do, though, is look at this thing really on Monday morning is one of the first maps I look at, and I look at it at the end of the week, okay? It seems like that gives you a better big picture look at it. Now, the next map that we think is really important is another one from NOAA, and this is a 7-day precip forecast map. And with this map, we always look at, hey, how much rain did we get throughout the country here, over the previous 7 days? And what is the forecast looking at as we move ahead? And today this is the QPF map from today. And as you can see, it's really hard to trade a drought here unless you want to get up into the far northern plains or into the western Canadian prairies. There's plenty of moisture, moving through the country. Now, the last map that we look at, and this is updated every day, is a 6 to 10 day or 8 to 14 day forecast. These are updated every afternoon. And it's something you got to pay attention to as well. Now, if there's plenty of moisture out there and these maps trend a little bit drier, not that big of a deal, okay? Now, if the crop's planted, though, we have to admit, we're just kind of looking for some moisture throughout the whole growing season. The bottom line, sitting here right now on May 25th, is except for the far northern plains, there's plenty of moisture out there for this crop. Now, we don't know what it's going to be like in June or July, but we are setting ourselves up fairly decent in here right now. Again, I would encourage you to maybe just Google for some of these maps. Again, these are all maps from NOAA, but it helps you take a big picture on what is going on. And we don't get caught up so much in someone got an inch of rain and the next person only got a tenth, or this area got 3 inches. That makes all the news. It really makes us look at the big picture. Now, every week we usually talk about world prices, and that since we didn't have much change, and when I'm talking about change on the difference between the U.S. prices and what's being offered on the rest of the world, the other thing we got to keep in mind is what's the rest of the world raising. Okay, and today as we search through the news, there are a number of things that really stuck out to us. Okay, the first one is that there's favorable weather in Australia. This is a news headline, and they're expecting another bumper harvest. Last year, they raised 33 million metric tons of wheat. The previous year, they had a drought, and they only raised 15 million metric tons of wheat. They're talking about increased acreage in Australia and a favorable start to the year. Again, Australia is responding to world's higher prices. Now, with China, it was out today that they estimated total grain production to hit 692 million metric ton. Well, what does that mean? Well, last year they produced 669 million metric ton. So if this forecast verifies, it'll be up over 3%. China was a large importer of grain last year. They've been buying grain so far this year. But if their production jumps up, okay, we need to be a little bit cautious that much of the bullishness about Chinese buying may already be in the market. Again, just like U.S. producers, Chinese producers are responding to the higher prices with more acres. The next thing on the newswire that got our attention was the Ukraine Grain Association expects the harvest of all grain and oilseeds to be up over 14% on the year and push 96 million metric ton. Again, Ukraine had a drought last year and they had reduced production, but with higher prices, a favorable start to the spring, okay, and more acres, they're looking for this bump back in production. The last highlight on the world market in here this week was Egypt bought wheat from Romania and the price delivered into Egypt was around $7 a bushel. That tells us that the U.S. market is too high and that this price has softened up. So we need to look at the global market. The other thing we're often asked about is what do we look at every day? And what I'm just going to go through here briefly is some of the charts that we look at every day and just point a few things out. This first one is a December 21 corn chart. And what's sticking out to us here with today's big break is that we are going below the purple line, which is a 50-day moving average of 525. It violated that at the end of March and quickly bounced back. This needs to be watched, okay? If we close below this, the trend is turning down, and then the concern becomes with corn is with the large specs net long, do we get into a liquidation type trade? Now, if we're looking for a rebound in the corn market, we think we can bounce back into the 560 to 580 area pretty easy. I mean, we are moving 20 to 30 cents a day. It doesn't take much for that to occur. When I get over to the bean chart, the bean market is still holding well above the 50-day moving average, remains in a strong uptrend. If it tests support like what corn does, we could get a breakdown into the 13 to 1320 area on November soybeans. But so far, you got to view this break on soybeans as more of a correction than a complete change of trend. When I get over to the wheat market, it looks to us that the trend has started to break lower. You've got Chicago wheat today. It looks like it's going to have consecutive closes below the 50-day moving average to turn the trend down. That is a concern. The KC wheat market is actually the most negative, and it really started breaking last week with the higher crop estimates from the Kansas Wheat Crop Tour. When you look at the charts, KC wheat is an obvious weak link right now, and harvest is right around the corner. When I get to Minneapolis wheat, I know it looks like today we're going to have consecutive closes below the 50-day moving average to turn the trend down. But when we get back to the weather maps, this is one of the markets where we could be adding a little bit of weather premium back into. If we're going to trade weather on the bullish side, Minneapolis wheat needs to be the one that does it. Now, as I look at wrapping up, today's webinar, these are just a few things to consider. When we're heading up in the market, the thing we heard all the time was I sold some grain and it was too cheap, okay? And I sold some more grain, it's too cheap. It just was higher every week. And we always talked about, well, we got to scale and sell on the way up. And then at some point, we got to be willing to sell on the way down. Is that time come right now? Okay, it looks to us, unless we have a major drought, which seems unlikely sitting here on May 25th, that our highs are in place right now. Now, if we get a bounce, what kind of recovery could we expect? Typically, from a high to a low, we always look for a retracement, anywhere from 33 to a 50% retracement of that down move. We mentioned on corn, okay, where we could get a bounce back into the 560, 575 area. Unless the weather turns severe, I don't know if we can go much more than that. We also need to remember this is the beginning of a weather market. Again, it's only May 25th, but every week we get an inch or two of rain pushes a potential drought 2 or 3 weeks down the road. Okay, we really need to remember that, okay, as we're looking at the past precip maps and we look at the 7-day forecast maps in here right now. Now, if we're going to look at the weak links in the grain market, we think that KC or Chicago wheat are going to be the weak links because of the upcoming harvest in here right now. And it seems like we've got a decent crop here in the U.S. If we have a strong link in the wheat market, we think Minneapolis wheat has got to be the leader. Our read on the spreads is Minneapolis wheat and Chicago wheat. That spread is just too tight. We think that spread, you could get Minneapolis wheat to trade anywhere from a 60 cent to $1 premium compared to Chicago wheat instead of its 25 cents in here right now. When I get over to the corn market, I think there's just a simple battle out there right now. We've got strong Chinese demand in here to offer us some support. But on the other hand, we got to view the weather and the potential increase in acreage at the end of June report as the big negative. Now, our concern when it comes to the demand side of the equation is just like when the market keeps on going up every week, that end users felt I need to buy this week because it's more expensive next week. With the market going down, do these importers take a pass and say, well, wait a second, I'm going to see what prices are going to be like next week? That's going to be an interesting dynamic on what's going to happen in here in the corn market specifically. The other thing we'd like to point out is China bought a ton of corn, yet prices did not go up. The focus of the market switching over to weather, and the problem is if our trend turns down with a specs net long, we could get a little bit of spec pressure in here. We're not saying this corn market is all over with in here right now and we're going to head straight down, but it is damaged. When I get over to the bean market, I mean, the biggest thing is just it's going to be volatile. This is why we really stress on beans, that you've got some beans forward contracted, budget dollars for some puts, and see what the weather brings us, as we look ahead. But sitting here on Tuesday afternoon and with today's trade, I mean, it's a bit more negative in here, no doubt about it. We look forward to seeing you here next Tuesday. Any questions, please drop us an email or give us a ring. Thank you and have a great day.